Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I want first to introduce myself. My name is Mariana Zamudio. I'm the CEMEX Tech Award Coordinator located in Monterrey, Mexico. For you who don't know the CEMEX Tech Award, it's a global call for social entrepreneurs or social innovators that have projects with social or environmental impact. So this award, it's the one that it's organized and hosting this series of webinars. So I wanted to, before giving the introduction to Emma, I wanted to talk to you, what are these sessions? So the CEMEX Tech Center and the CEMEX Tech Award, in collaboration with some of our partners, such as Impact Hub, Disruptivo TV, Ashoka, Make Sense, and Arise, we developed a program of free webinars. Some are in Spanish and others are in English, which are oriented to reconnect, redesign, and replan our ventures, to develop and strengthen our personal resilience, and by extension, the resilience of our projects in which we're involved in. So I wanted to introduce Emma. Emma is the Senior Program Advisor at Impact Hub King's Cross. She designs and manages programs that supports impact-driven business along their entrepreneurial journey, from starting up to scaling. Her passion is to support entrepreneurs to create and grow impactful businesses they love. Emma is particularly motivated by making the social enterprise space more inclusive and diverse. So Emma, thank you very much for joining us. I'm really happy to connect with you and that you can connect with everyone that's here with us. And well, I'm leaving you the microphone.
Great. Thank you so much, Mariana, for the introduction, and also thanks for inviting me. So good morning or afternoon or evening to everyone, depending sort of what time zone you're in. Before kicking off, just a quick reminder of webinar etiquette. Unless you're speaking, please keep yourself muted so we don't all hear the background noise. And if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat function. So if you haven't used it before, it's the bottom button in the middle. I might not see your questions as I go because I'm going to be sharing my screen, but I'll try to take pauses after certain sections and see if there's anything that's come up and try to answer them there. In just a minute, I'll go over kind of the structure of the next hour, but you'll see that there's also some time at the end for Q&A session as well, probably about 10 to 15 minutes. This will be shorter or longer depending sort of if there's any questions that come up throughout the hour. And I believe we're recording the session as well. Mariana, maybe you can tell them later how they can access that. But if you did have to dash off early and you wanted to reach out to me beforehand, I'm just going to pop my email in the chat right now, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me at any point afterwards. Great. So I would love to do a round of introductions and hear all about you and your impactful ventures, but unfortunately, we don't really have the time. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction of myself, just a little bit more detail than Mariana provided, and then we will get started. So as Mariana mentioned, my name is Emma. I'm the Senior Programs Advisor at Impact Hub King's Cross in London, where I work with a fantastic team to deliver a number of support programs for impact-led entrepreneurs at pretty much any stage of their business journey, from startup to scale. And we also work really hard to build the social enterprise ecosystem, both in the UK and in other geographies. So you might be able to tell from my weird kind of quasi accent that I'm not originally from the UK. I am from Canada, but I've been living in London for the past 5 years, working in business incubators and supporting primarily impact-led businesses. I'm not sure where most of you are tuning in from today. I believe a portion of you are from Impact Hub Monterrey. My partner is South American, actually, so I can speak a bit of basic Spanish, but I definitely don't want to torture you with my terrible accent, so I will be presenting in English. And I was asked to run a session today that provided tools and ideas of how entrepreneurs can and are having to pivot their business model in the current situation. And this topic actually really excited me for 2 reasons. First, amongst all the very real sadness and frustration surrounding COVID-19 and its effects on people around the world, I've been continuously inspired by some of the really innovative and creative solutions that have emerged from this crisis. From communities coming together to support one another, all the way to radical shifts in how businesses are operating. And the second reason this topic resonated with me so much is because it's the entrepreneurs, businesses, and organizations that are comfortable with pivoting that end up being the most resilient. And this is true both in the current situation and in normal times. So I was told the webinar series is called Resilience for Entrepreneurs, and I really can't stress how important it is to prioritize resilience for your business, as well as yourself as entrepreneurs. And again, this is relevant at any stage, but particularly at the start of your journey. I'm just going to share my screen now. Great. You guys should all be able to see that. Perfect. So today we're going to cover the following. We'll briefly assess the different types of pivots. So be that incremental or significant, short-term or long-term. And then I'm going to walk you through some tips and ways to assess what kind of pivot you need and what will be most successful both for your business as well as your community, which are, of course, your customers and your beneficiaries. And at the end, we'll look at a few case studies from social enterprise that have managed to successfully pivot during COVID-19. But I'll also be scattering examples throughout the whole webinar. So hopefully something will stick for you and you'll find it applicable for your own business. And I just want to say that I know these are really challenging times for all of you. I'm working with a lot of businesses right now, and I get it. And I'm hoping that you'll find some way of looking at pivoting that's really helpful for you along this journey. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I was told that most of you are sort of at the pre-incubation stage. So you've identified the problem that you're looking to solve and have worked on developing your idea and maybe even started trading. So since you're still maybe in the early stages of your business, I would encourage you to get really comfortable with the term and concept of pivoting. So I'm sure you've done a lot of pre-work to develop your idea, such as market research, testing assumptions, and customer discovery. But even so, you're going to discover and learn a lot as you develop your business. And these learnings may require you to adapt at any stage, really. And those who test, learn, and adapt are always going to be the ones who are most successful. So again, please don't commit to your idea or your solution, but rather commit to the problem that you're looking to solve and your vision. And then from there, be ready to adapt your idea to fit the current situation. And I appreciate that it's probably the current situation that's forcing you to change your business, but pivoting isn't a bad thing to come back to and then continuously revisit, even in normal times. It's important to stay alert and aware and to move with the times so you don't get complacent. And I was asked to provide examples of ventures that have specifically shifted their business models in the current situation. But again, I want to emphasize that it's not strictly related to this situation at any point in your journey, and for many reasons, you may be forced to pivot. For instance, you don't know if maybe legislator will come in next week that's going to make your solution redundant, or new technology is going to be developed. So it's always good to be able to stay agile and not get stuck in what you're doing currently. So before we look at changes to the business model, let's quickly revisit the term. So your business model, very simply, is just how you deliver value. And this is the same if you're a social business or a non-social business. However, if you are a social business, you may also have a separate social value proposition. So how you're bringing value to your beneficiaries, in addition to the commercial value proposition, the value that you're bringing to your customers. Now, pivoting refers to strategically changing significant elements of this model. And I'm going to use the term significant lightly because it might not be a huge structural change, but it's also not something minor. So a pivot may include changes to the product or service, the team, the revenue model for the target customer. And over the next kind of 45, 50 minutes or so, I'll provide you with ways of thinking about how you might enact these changes and some tips to bear in mind when doing so. But first, let's explore the different types of pivots. So not all pivots have to be radical changes. And depending on your situation, if you're lucky, you might be able to get away with a fairly painless shift. But on the other hand, unfortunately, some business models will be much more challenging to pivot than others. So we have incremental shifts versus radical changes. So the incremental shifts are the ones that are most manageable, where you can more or less keep your existing product and client base, and you simply have to rethink how it's being distributed. For instance, a yoga instructor or a yoga studio can switch pretty easily to running classes virtually online. And I've actually done this myself, and it's obviously not the same as teaching in person. You don't get to connect with your students, but it's a lot easier than setting up a whole new business-to-business supply chain and trying to figure out how to serve clients via e-commerce, right? A whole bigger ballgame, that one. And in the worst case scenario, some organizations might need to start completely from scratch. So hopefully they can keep some of their assets, like their core team, but they typically need to switch to a new product or service at a new customer segment. So a lot of companies in hospitality or events or the travel industry are currently in this position. In addition to the size of the shift, though, the duration of the change, the duration that the change is adopted for can also vary. Now, usually, unless you're running a series of experiments, if you find a pivot that works, you'll most likely adopt the change. However, there are circumstances, like the ones we find ourselves in now, which may force you to enact a short-term change and then allow you to go back to the original model when business as usual returns. So as I mentioned, some of your changes might be short-term measures, while others could become a long-term offering in your business. So to provide you with maybe an ethical, maybe opportunistic example of a short-term pivot, a number of alcohol companies have started to produce hand sanitizer during this time as demand for it has risen. However, once this urgent health need is gone, it's likely that most of these companies will stop producing it. On the flip side, other ventures might maintain the changes they've introduced to their business model, even when we're back to normal times. And just a bit of a side note here, we don't really fully understand long-term implications of COVID-19 yet on the world. So bear in mind that what you classify as a short-term pivot may actually be a change you have to adopt for longer than you anticipate. And in terms of a short-term pivot that might become part of an integrated business model, I can actually use Impact Hub King's Cross as an example. For a while now, we've been meaning to deliver our programs online and shift everything to online platforms. And the main reason behind this is it just makes all of our support a lot more accessible. We can reach more entrepreneurs, and we can expand our support outside of London, where most of the support tends to be. There's less in the more rural areas of the UK. So we've been meaning to do this for a while, and we had a number of programs that were due to run in person when the self-isolation measures began. So we had to really scramble to get everything online. It was an exhausting few weeks, but we did it. We know how to do it. We've learned a lot. And as a team, we now feel that we can deliver events and programs at a really high quality online. And I think when we go back to normal times and our spaces reopen, we're not going to strictly deliver workshops online. We will go back to in-person delivery, but there's definitely some parts of the program and events that we will still do online because it's a lot more cost effective and we can reach more people. So as I scatter examples throughout the next 45 minutes, try to notice if you think that these are likely to be short-term pivots or changes that are to be maintained in the business in the long run. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen, so I can't see how many people are here. But I thought I would just really briefly pause before moving on to see if there's any questions. If there are, just drop them in the chat and I can quickly pick them up. Otherwise, don't worry, we'll have the opportunity at the end for a Q&A. Seems like everybody is following along so far. So I'll keep going and I'll pick up any other questions at the end. Okay. So let's move on to the practical steps. Let's see if I can share this. So these are steps you might go through in order to pivot your business model in a sustainable way. And so I have revisit, assess, respond, adapt, and thrive. And I've actually borrowed steps 2 to 5 from a really amazing business incubator back in my home city of Vancouver. But I've added number 1 because I think it's particularly important for impact-driven entrepreneurs. So revisit. This comes down to revisiting your purpose. You're all ethically minded, which means you stand out from regular businesses because you're driven by a particular social or environmental problem that you want to solve. Now, this overarching problem, such as, I don't know, vulnerable people's access to healthcare or childhood obesity in X community, it isn't going to change. Although in the particular scenario we're in, it might actually become more complicated and more layered. But your solution to this problem and how you achieve it might change numerous times throughout your journey. Some of you may find yourself in a very different situation that will require drastic changes to your business model. And although it might be challenging, it is really important to try not to lose sight of your mission just to make the situation work. And I also think that keeping your purpose top of mind will help motivate you through the inevitable ups and downs of pivoting. And as you find ways to pivot your model, think about how the changes might affect your beneficiary group or community. And this is really important. And honestly, the best way to check in is just by asking them. Involve them in the decision-making process, perhaps as an advisory board, perhaps doing online community consultations to better understand the effects of these changes. So during this revisiting stage, after you've brought the vision back to the forefront of your mind and you're making sure that it's the foundation of all your decision-making, you'll then be moving through steps 2 to 4 over the upcoming months. So from assess to thrive. And some of you may have already started this journey already. So you need to first assess the current situation, both internally and externally. And once you have a good overview of the situation and what opportunities are available to you, you can then respond, adapt as you go, and eventually thrive. And then, as I mentioned before, you might be repeating this process over and over again because pivoting is okay. It's part of the journey. So I'd like to provide you with some tips for how you might carry out steps 2 to 4 while bringing examples and case studies to inspire you along the way. And apologies, I think I have quite a few food-related examples scattered throughout here because we're running 3 programs right now for ethical and sustainable food businesses. So all of their pivots are very top of mind for me. But I believe there's some other sectors in there as well. So number 2, assess. So start by looking internally at your business to assess first, essentially how far you can go right now and how quickly you need to act. And this largely boils down to your cash flow, which is going to indicate how much time you have to deliberate these changes before acting. So this could be known also as your runway or how much money you have in the bank, essentially. Next, you're going to take stock of external factors. So how has the world changed in light of this pandemic? Now, you won't have all the answers because no one has a crystal ball, but try to take the time to assess the situation as best you can. And this is going to help you in the long run and potentially prevent you from having to pivot again in the near future. So think about potential changes and how the world might operate. How does this affect the behavior of your beneficiaries or your customers? According to the CEO of one of the major retailers in the UK called Sainsbury's, over 50% of their shoppers have now moved online. And he believes this is a trend that will continue post the Corona era. And I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with this e-commerce platform called Alibaba that's based in China. So they were a really, really early company in the early 2000s. And it was actually the SARS pandemic that helped its growth and success because people got really used to shopping online when everyone was self-isolating during SARS as well. So try to be aware of what potential trends could be happening, especially in your space. And once you have a clear overview of the internal situation of your business and the external factors, you can start to look at your specific case to gain insights that will help you choose the best way to pivot. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of different ways to pivot a business model, and the one that you choose will be very unique to your business and your situation. You could, for instance, be shifting your target customer, changing how you're distributing your product or service. You could be changing your pricing model, identifying new products or service that could support your customers or beneficiaries. And sadly, I can't tell you which is best for your venture. I wish I could. I'm sure I'd be a millionaire if I could do that. But I can provide some questions to help shape your thinking and help hopefully get you to the right answer. So I was trying to think of the best way to do that. And I think the most helpful way could be to walk through the elements of the business model and pose some COVID-19 related questions for you to consider. Now, these are questions that you and your team can answer internally. But again, unless you carry out proper customer discovery and market research, you're going to just be making assumptions. So it might be worthwhile to view these as bases for questions that you go out and ask your customers, your community, and the market in order to validate them. And by doing so, obviously, you're probably based on evidence, not what you think is the case. So starting with the key activities your business performs, i.e. its basic functions and operations. This first one might be a bit of a tough pill to swallow if the answer is no. But first and foremost, the most important question, do your customer or beneficiary still want or need what you're offering? And then, perhaps more positively, what new opportunities are available to your business? And also ask yourself if these opportunities are in line with your vision and your values. So remember, this is why you need to have your vision as the basis of your decision making. There might be a number of new opportunities you can take advantage of, but if they don't fit your mission and your vision, do you really want to pursue them? If there's no other means of survival, then maybe yes, I don't know, it's up to you. But I encourage you to think about how these decisions might affect your brand identity in the long run. And finally, what new products or services could you develop to support your customers and beneficiaries at these times? And you'll see examples of how companies have done so in the case studies that I'll share throughout. Now, moving on to customer segments. So ask yourself, what's changed for your customers? Can they still buy your product or service? Can they do it in the same way as they were doing it before? Has your target customer shifted? Try to find out who are the customers that can still buy from you. So these are often called the recession-proof customers. So those that will still buy from you even if they have less money. And I don't mean to be discouraging, but these are pretty unprecedented times. Economies around the world have been severely affected by COVID-19, and people's purchasing behavior and consumption patterns are likely going to change as a result. So with less disposable income, individuals are probably less likely to buy non-essential items. So bear this in mind if you are positioned as a luxury product or service, because you might need to rethink your pricing strategy for what you're offering. An example of shifting customer segments is a company in the UK called Shelf Now, who were originally a business-to-business platform connecting independent food and drink producers with independent retailers and cafes. So they're essentially looking to support independent producers by taking out the middleman, so they don't have to pay the distributor fee. And as soon as the restrictions were enforced and the cafes and independent retailers closed, they very rapidly pivoted to a business-to-consumer approach, connecting independent producers directly to customers through an e-commerce platform they managed to build very quickly. So this allowed them to not only keep themselves in business, but also still support the independent producers that they are working with. So they have learned that this is actually a pretty profitable customer segment for them to pursue. And I was speaking to the founder the other day, and he said that they might continue the B2C arm in the future. And moving on to beneficiaries. So depending on your models, your beneficiaries might or might not be your customers. So if they aren't, asking what has changed for them. Is your solution still relevant right now? Can you reach them in the same way? If you can't, then who can? And this is particularly relevant if you're working with vulnerable people, but are they isolating right now? And finally, are they facing any new challenges? Maybe you can address these. Ask them where other solutions are falling short, and there might be an opportunity for you to bridge some of these gaps. And moving on to channels, in terms of pivoting due to COVID-19, this is the most common change I've actually seen companies adopt, mainly because people have been instructed to stay at home, which means more and more difficult to reach your beneficiaries or customers. So think about how else you might reach them. Do you maybe need to reconsider distribution? And I've already mentioned, for some, this will be a lot easier than others, such as simply using technology and the internet. So if you were selling your products in store, the obvious choice might be to start selling online. But it's not always that easy to drive sales. So if you are looking to pivot that way, make sure that you invest a bit of time and money to optimize your website. So make sure the user journey is nice and simple and clear, and also devise a marketing plan that sends people directly to your website or whatever e-commerce site you're using. But online isn't the only channel available to you. I recently caught up with one of our program alumni who produces a dairy-free milk alternative using a tuber plant called tiger nuts. And he started selling directly to consumers, but by partnering with other local complementary products. So they've essentially made a bundle. And by teaming up with a baker and an egg farmer, it means that customers can buy a number of staple products together, which makes them a lot more likely to do so if they can do it all at once. They don't have to do 5 different shops. And this is actually great because it also expands their reach as they can tap into each other's customer bases and makes logistics and delivery much easier as well because it's all shared amongst businesses that are involved. And I've seen a number of complementary products start to do this, start to create these bundles as well. I see them all over Instagram. So thinking about collaborative selling options might be good if you don't have the infrastructure to carry out delivery yourself. So think about what other products your customers might be buying and see if you can team up with them. And finally, there's another example that I heard of at the start of quarantine. And I tried to look into it in more detail when I was thinking about this presentation. I couldn't find anything. So I'm not sure if it's still running, but I thought it was extremely creative. So we all know supermarkets are now introducing or growing their delivery service. But at the beginning, there was so much demand that the delivery time was often quite long. And this is a big issue because it meant that vulnerable people weren't able to access food very quickly. And a lot of people were going hungry, specifically the elderly population. And I read about a supermarket chain site in North Mexico called Meco that partnered with taxi drivers that would normally set up base outside their shop, and they hired them to fulfill orders for consumers who sent their shopping list via WhatsApp. And I like this because it shows that the supermarket was still committed to reaching their customers, even though they couldn't deliver everything themselves. And as a consequence, they also supported taxi drivers who no longer had trips to run because everyone else was staying at home. So this example shows you don't always need a great deal of infrastructure to enact change quickly. You might simply have the resources available to you already, so to take stock of what's around you. Moving on to customer and beneficiary relationships now. The most important thing I think to emphasize here is communication. So ask yourself, how can you still build loyalty and confidence in your brand by providing value to your customers or beneficiaries? And especially if you can't do it in the same way as before. And if you are in this situation, then it's important to show them that you care and that you're working hard to find a solution despite the changes to everyone's situation. And this will help build customer loyalty. And I guess don't forget that pivoting is largely experimenting. So yes, I'm hoping that you'll go out and do the pre-work, the market research to assess if you think it will be a successful change to the business model. But don't waste time and hold on to it if it isn't working. Ask your customers and your beneficiaries if the solution is working for them. If not, why? What changes would they like to see? What is their ideal solution? And then work from there. How can you keep your customers engaged if you can't sell to them in the same way? I'd say content is always an option. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword here because, yes, everyone's stuck at home, so they're online a lot more and they're reading a lot more. But also it means that everyone is being bombarded by stories, so they might not be reading what you're putting out. What I have noticed, though, is that people during these times really like positive stories. So if you're having a great impact, share it, and you're more likely to have better engagement. An example of kind of reaching your customers and still providing value throughout these times is a catering company in London called Alicia Catering. And they have a sustainability focus. So they use surplus fruit and vegetables and imperfect produce that would otherwise become food waste, and they make incredible dishes out of it. So they pivoted from being a business-to-business catering service to a business-to-consumer home grocery delivery. And one thing that they've introduced, which I really like, is a blog that gets emailed to the clients weekly with tips and recipes to tackle food waste at home, such as creative ways to use parts of vegetables people usually throw away. And I think what I like most about this example is that they are still tackling the problem of food waste. They've just found a different way of approaching it. And I've also seen other restaurants and cafes and stuff hosting like virtual cook-alongs and cooking workshops. So there's still ways to communicate with your customers, even if you can't meet with them face-to-face. And just still on the relationship building, I'm going to share another example from Brigade Kitchen, which is a high-end social enterprise restaurant in London. And they train individuals who are at risk of experiencing homelessness, and they help them gain employment across different roles in the hospitality sector. So in addition to supporting their own beneficiaries through these like fairly challenging times, they've extended their support to others as well. So they launched something called the Local Helpers, which is a service that connects people with professional and community support in the areas of mental well-being and isolation, food supply, financial hardship. And as they're a high-end restaurant, they have a more affluent customer group and have managed to raise money to fund the service by running a crowdfunding campaign, whereby those who donate receive an exclusive cookbook. So the actions that they've taken to still support their community actually help to raise their brand awareness and the confidence in their brand, because everyone can see that they're actually taking action and they're looking to support their community. And okay, I'm going to quickly get through the rest of the business model because I'm conscious we don't have tons of time. And then I'll take a pause after these ones and we can look and see if there's any questions. I think I see something's been dropped in the chat. But looking at your cost structure, so have your fixed costs changed? Are there new costs you might have to consider? So if you have to engage new suppliers, there may be new costs involved, such as delivery or tariffs if it's international. If you're thinking of selling online, do you have an adequate marketing budget? Have you thought of the transaction fees for payment processing? All these little things that could add up. So take stock of all those. And one thing I'm actually really curious about when we come out of this is how many restaurants might need to assess whether it's worth reopening for them, especially under social distancing rules. Because if you have less people coming in, you obviously have less revenue. And additionally, you might have higher hygiene-related costs, such as protective equipment, cleaning products. You might need to think about the staff time in order to carry out more deep cleans. And some restaurants have seen how profitable the delivery channel is for them, and they might choose to relocate to a small location and focus on just doing takeaway, because having an entire restaurant is actually very costly. So moving on to community, how are the conversations that your community is having changing? And do you need to change the conversation you're having with them? Think about how you might be able to turn this into a strategic advantage as well. And I'd highly suggest here, making sure that your team, advisors, funders, investors, anyone who's supporting you, is really on board with these changes as well, because you want everyone to be aligned and moving in the same direction. Otherwise, you're likely to have friction, and it's going to be much more difficult to pivot. And moving on to partners. Are your partners still relevant and able to engage with your business, or might you need to identify new ones? So how can you use this opportunity to really prove to your partners that you're committed to the cause, and you'll find creative ways to deliver? A number of the programs that impact Hub Kings Cross are actually funded because we want to offer the support free to entrepreneurs. And as soon as the home measures were introduced, the stay-at-home measures, sorry, we contacted all of our funders with an overview of the changes we were going to introduce to the programs and a plan for delivery. So ensuring them that we would still meet kind of the agreed upon objectives. And they were all really receptive and impressed by the actions we took. So I mentioned a couple of times throughout, but make sure that you're communicating with your stakeholders throughout this. This way you can build trust and strengthen the relationship. And moving on to revenue streams. I know this can be a fun or maybe a scary one, depends which situation you're in. But which revenue streams have you lost? And check in to make sure if this is going to be a short-term loss or if it's likely to be a long-term loss. Also, do a bit of health check and see if your existing revenue streams have maybe become more vulnerable. And then think of new ones you could explore. So how might you be able to monetize some of your current services? Does your pricing model maybe need to change? So remember, people will have less disposable income now. So if your membership service, you may want to think about more flexible options for your customers. And please remember as you develop your business that having diverse revenue streams is key. So Impact Hub Kings Cross has two main revenue streams. We have our space-based income that comes from renting desks and meeting rooms and event space in our co-working space. And then we have our business support income, which comes from running programs and doing mentoring and consultancy. If we didn't have that second revenue stream, we would be in a pretty tough spot at the moment because our space is closed. We have absolutely no money coming in. So I know that the majority of you are kind of social enterprises and not charities, but think about your financial sustainability right from the start. So have a diversity in terms of your revenue streams, and try not to be reliant on grant funding. We don't really know what the funding landscape is going to look like over the next couple of years, but you can guess that most of it is going to be diverted into kind of emergency services like food banks. And also, most corporates that give out money and funding do so through a percentage of their profits. And so if they're going to be less profitable, it just means there's less money kind of floating around. So I don't want to be discouraging, but we need to acknowledge the situation that we're in. And unfortunately, we're in a tough one. But you can choose to view this as a really good opportunity to build resilience and adapt. And you'll come out definitely stronger on the other side. So for a little bit of encouragement and inspiration, I'm going to share a couple examples of companies that have done a really great job of pivoting. But before moving on to the final bit where we review the case studies, I want to see again if there's any questions. Don't forget, we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. So if there's anything long, I would just hold on to it for then. But I will check the chat. Cesar, you asked, in the case of small business that is going bad in sales, how do you identify between the business model or wrong marketing and sales strategy? Good question. In terms of your marketing and sales strategy, there's ways of testing if it's going well. So make sure that you have the proper metrics to check your marketing. Because it could be that if you have an amazing, glorious website, but you're not marketing it online very well, then you're bringing no one to your website, so they can't buy your products or services. So check with your metrics, make sure. And same goes with sales as well. There's lots of different ways that you can test it. So that would be the first one, is don't just make guesses, use the evidence that's available to you. And if an entrepreneur pivots, how long do they have to try it to find out if it works or not? Yeah, that's a really good question. it's going to kind of depend on the scenario and the type of pivot, to be perfectly honest. But I would encourage you to stay agile. So as you pivot, keep asking questions. Think of it as a short-term thing, but ensure that you have long enough to see if that's if the evidence is actually applicable. And unfortunately, this is a tough question to answer because it's going to depend what you're pivoting. But what I would do is, before you make the change, sit down and say, okay, at what point will we know if this has been successful or not? So if you're starting to switch to online sales, it could be like, okay, we know this is a successful pivot if we reach, I don't know, 300 people viewing our site and at least 30 of those becoming conversions and buying things by week 5. So you can set your own metrics and then check in and test from there. If you're way off that mark, then maybe reevaluate. And if you really don't know how to set these, go ask someone who's done it, see who else has pivoted in a similar way, and reach out to them, ask them for support, especially if you're an early stage entrepreneur. Don't be afraid to ask people for support. If you have a group of advisors as well, show it to them, ask them, do you think this seems right, or are we way off? Okay, I'm going to move into some case studies. Let's see, which one do I have first here? Yeah. I don't know if anyone's heard of Harambee in South Africa. They're an incredible youth-led employment accelerator, and they provide young people with work readiness training, job seeker support, and online learning. And they had actually already sort of pivoted part of their services before the crisis because they knew it was extremely expensive for young people to get to their training sites. So they started to move most of their services online, and they were using phone calls and WhatsApp recordings to reach the young people. So they were actually pretty well prepared when the self-isolation measures were introduced. But in addition to shifting and pivoting the medium with which they worked with these young people, they also had to shift their communication and their messaging. It's impossible to know what the economy is going to look like on the other side of this, but it's likely that employment prospects aren't looking great, and especially for young people who don't have training. So they wanted to still support the youth and make them feel like people were rooting for them. So they launched a campaign called 3 million in 3 weeks. And the idea is that they wanted to mobilize 3 million people to come together in this network of partners and youth as well, and share resources and opportunities that were going to support youth through these times. So this could be something about like government regulation on getting back into employment, training opportunities that are available, job prospects. It was just a whole database of support for them. And it also just made them feel like people were actually still looking out for them, that they weren't forgotten. And it's interesting because in speaking about what the future holds, the founder said that honestly, they don't know, but they'll keep pivoting in such a way to address the problems they set out to achieve, which is supporting young people. So again, this is just an example of they have the same vision, but the way that they're doing it or the messaging that they're putting out is going to keep changing as the times change, as our current situation changes. This one, community gym. I really like this one actually. So they're a fairly new gym. I think they just opened, they were just about to celebrate their first anniversary when self-isolation measures were introduced. And they were doing extremely well in their first year. Their membership sales were great. All of their classes were sold out. And so closing down a gym in their first year could have pretty much ruined their business, especially at such an early stage. But luckily, the team came up with some really quick solutions, which I liked. They rapidly filmed a bunch of classes, and they equipped all their instructors to create kind of home studios so they could stream classes virtually, which again is not novel. We've seen a lot of people do this. But what I do like is they noticed that there was one issue. And this is that most of the classes they ran, the most popular ones, required specialized equipment that people didn't have at their home, such as like spin bikes or weights. something that you would find in a gym, but probably not in everyday people's flats or homes. So they rapidly found a solution whereby they started to rent the equipment that was in their studio that was just sitting empty to their members. And there was so much demand for this that they actually had to go out and rent equipment from other gyms and then rent it to their clients. But I thought this was a fantastic way of quickly coming up with a new, A, adapting to the needs of their clients, but B, coming up with a new revenue stream for themselves as well by quickly shifting and becoming sort of a rental agency as well. And this is another example from Canada. Obviously, I read a lot about entrepreneurs in Canada because that's where I'm from. So Granville Biomedical, they're a company from Vancouver, my home city, and they manufacture medical models for like surgical simulations and trainings. And they use 3D printing to do so, to create these models for people to I guess, experiment on or train on. And when the severity of COVID-19 became apparent, the Canadian Prime Minister put a call out to any companies that could help manufacture personal protective equipment because there's such a need for it. So, for example, face shields, like is in this photo here. And they quickly responded, Granville Biomedical, because they wanted to help. And so by adapting their existing 3D printing capabilities, they were able to quickly pivot their business model and make personal protective equipment like face shields. They also did cloth face masks. And you can see here in the picture, they have these little button. It's like a presser that you can use for elevators. They also created this kind of like C-hook, which allows you to open doors and cupboards without actually touching it. So all of their innovations essentially minimized how much people were exposed to contaminated surfaces. And it's interesting because the founder was saying that, you know, before they decided what to create, they just allowed the team to kind of go crazy and come up with anything. And there's a quote there that I've included because she said, you know, crises are extremely stressful, but they can also brew a lot of creativity. And I do kind of agree with that. I mean, it is stressful, but there's lots of room for innovation. The patent office gets the most applications during times of crises because people are just forced to innovate. They're forced to come up with creative solutions. So all hope is not lost. There's still lots you can come up with. You can become creative. And I hope that these kind of examples have inspired you slightly. Hopefully they've sparked some ideas for your own personal venture. That's my intention. And in terms of takeaways, I guess, I would just say it is hard, first and foremost. You're going to be in a tough situation. So try to motivate yourself as much as possible. Surround yourself with people who will motivate you as well and help you through these hard times. More practically, try to assess the situation as best as possible before pivoting. And again, don't be afraid to ask your customers and beneficiaries what they need and if your change is working for them too. Try to view it positively. I know this is challenging, but you will come out of it stronger enterprises and entrepreneurs, and definitely more resilient to future changes as well. So try to be open to the creative challenge. I would say don't lose sight of your mission, which we mentioned the importance of throughout, and also sort of leads on the next one, be authentic and transparent. So communicate with your community and customers, especially if you're in a situation where you have to make a compromise during the crisis that isn't as aligned with your values as you would like. And I mean, it really comes down to your intention. So be ambitious, but you don't have to be perfect. If you really can't find a solution that's feasible and you have to make compromises, then just be open about it to your stakeholders. Let them know why you're doing it and the reasons behind it. Let them know if it's a short-term COVID-19 type change or if it's going to be a long-term change. You know, different solutions will require different responses, and customers are more likely to be understanding and supportive if you're transparent about it. Be realistic and not idealistic. And finally, look for ideas that work. There's so many ways to have great ideas. You don't need to be the most creative, innovative person. Sometimes the best ideas come from building on existing ones. So find out what people are doing in your sector and what's working from them and build on it. So that's it for me today. I hope this has been useful for you. Hopefully sparked a couple ideas or might help you in terms of thinking how you might pivot your business model. So Mariana, I know we don't have as much time as I would have hoped for some Q&A, but maybe I'll just transition into this. I can see a couple questions in the chat from Lalo, so maybe I'll answer these. What is the most stressful project that you came over to finish? Which social media will dominate the market? Where website, blogs, platforms can we trust to find creative ideas for entrepreneurs? Okay, interesting. I'm going to answer the second one first. So which social media platform will dominate the market? I guess to be honest, I'm not a marketing expert, so I'm not up to speed on it, but find out what other companies in your sector are using. That's usually the best place to start. If you have a product, especially if it's a food product or it's a luxury product and it photographs really well, then usually Instagram, because it's quite photo-based. It doesn't seem like people are using Facebook anymore. I'm not hip and young anymore, but I know that lots of young people are using TikTok. I don't know if you can advertise on there, but I would say just find out which ones people in your sector are using. You don't have to use every channel. It might be really stressful if you try to use all of them. Focus on one and really nail it. For instance, if you make beautiful cookies, Twitter's probably not your platform because that's more for sharing articles and stuff. So again, just look back and see what people are doing. Which website, blogs, and platform can we trust to find creative ideas for entrepreneur businesses? That's a tough one. There's so much out there. I guess there's certain ones that I kind of trust and follow. I'm quite lucky, and Cesar as well. We're in the Impact Hub network. So it's a global network of impact-led co-working spaces and entrepreneurs. So we have a platform there where lots of stories and articles are shared. So I get a lot of my content there. But you can also look at various different websites like Ashoka. Some of the ones in the UK that I know is Pioneers Post. They provide a lot of stories about social entrepreneurs. The Young Foundation. And then, I don't know, I know some Canadian ones as well. I've cited some of them in my slides, and we can share the slides after if Marianne and Cesar want to. But yeah, I think it depends sort of on your geography, but have a look and see what's out there. And maybe Cesar or Marianne will be able to send through. Perfect. Yeah, Marianne's put a suggestion there too.
Yeah.
And then the first question, what is the most stressful project that you came over? Stressful project. That's a good question. I don't know that I have one off the top of my head, but I have worked with some very stressed out entrepreneurs over the past month, particularly those that are finding it difficult to pivot and are also solo founders. It can feel like the world is kind of closing in on you if you don't have a team to support you through these changes. So if that is the case for you, I would say that my suggestion is go and find advisors, supporters. If you're all in the same cohort together, use each other to help come up with creative solutions to the challenges that you're facing at the moment.
I think those are all.
Any other questions?
Yeah, if anyone has another question, please let us know in the chat. I wanted to share, because when you were talking, Emma, that you should read to experts or to allies or things like that, it happened to us in the CEMEX Tech Award. As some of you may know, part of when we select the winners, which are around 50 persons from all over the world, we fly everyone to Monterrey to receive a boot camp, 1 week for them in Monterrey with workshops. And because of this pandemic, we aren't going to be able to fly everyone here. So we decided to have the experience week in a virtual format. And we were at first a little bit nervous because it's a challenge, but then we thought, like, we have amazing allies, Impact Hub, Ashoka, Disruptivo TV, which I mentioned, that are experts in doing this, and we don't have to do it by ourselves. So we reached out to them, and we have started to make some creative sessions to develop this new format for the Experience Week. And it had really helped us, and we found some things that we have never thought about before, but we are going to keep them doing for the next years. So this is an opportunity for everyone to innovate, but also to reach other people. So I just wanted
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. And it's all about learning from each other too. So for instance, all of the Impact Hubs started to do online delivery, and I was having phone calls with program managers in Amsterdam or Berlin, just sharing best practices. And I mean, with any pivot, there's going to be a lot of learning as you go. And it was the same kind of thing for us. We got the online delivery nailed down. We felt very happy with it. And then we realized that we were sort of missing out on the cohort building element. And how can we make sure that the participants feel like they actually have a community and they have a chance to chat to each other as they would over coffee or over lunch. So there's little things, and it's constant learning, but it's a great position to be in.
Yeah.
You don't need to get it perfect right from the start.
Exactly. People are usually very understanding. Like, we're in a different situation. Nobody has ever lived, well, nobody that's living right now has ever lived this. So we are just moving along the way. So if there aren't any other questions, Emma, I just wanted to thank you again for being with us. As I told you at the beginning, this session is being recorded, and we will upload it in in social media like Facebook and Instagram from the CEMEX Tech Award, YouTube, and also in our webpage. So I'm thinking that this same week we will upload it, and I will email you, every one of you, because I have your mails, and let you know where everything is. So thank you everyone, Nicola, Rob, for being with us. Emma, thank you. Cesar, you as well, and have a nice day.
Thank you. And I'm just going to say, I'm dropping my email in the chat once more. If you want to reach out to me for anything, please feel free.
Thanks, Emma.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.